she did notice that the galaxy had been slowing down because the bees were very sensitive to that. So she knew something was wrong, and she was afraid that somebody was angry and that something was wrong. In their religion, they thought that maybe their bee gods were angry with them. But the doctor explained that what was going on, and he said, you know what you can do? You don't have, because she said, well, should we relocate to another place? And he said, no, because that would still produce the pollution. But you can install a cleaning device that would absorb the energy that you release at this factory, so that it wouldn't release this pollution anymore, and that would allow the negative energy ions to go into this black hole, which would come out the white hole at the center of the galaxy, which would feed the entity. And so she agreed to install this device, which the doctor explained how to build it, because he was an expert in physics and engineering. And so he helped them build it. And they went back through the black hole with the negative energy, out the white hole, and back to that planet with no atmosphere. And they already could see that things were flowing better. And Sally communicated with the entity, and he said that he was getting food again, and he thanked them. And they left, but he said that as a gift he wanted them to take a little piece of, each take a little rock, a little stone from that planet near the center of the galaxy. And so they did. They each broke off a piece of rock near the center of the galaxy, and they didn't know why he wanted them to have it. And it wasn't until Darth and Joe got home and they looked at the rock, they could see that when they squeezed it, a huge blast of energy would come out of it, and it could be used like to blow up enemy spaceships, or as a source of energy if they needed it at any time.
And they could come back and get more.
They could, but these rocks had enough energy in them for all their needs, because they could keep squeezing it and it would happen over and over again. And their mind would direct the beam of light that would come out. And so they thanked Doctor Who because they got great souvenirs. They got these new powers just from going on this trip, and they also learned a lot about how the galaxy worked and what was at the center of the galaxy. So, and they enjoyed working with Sally too. And Sally ended up having a lot of adventures with the Doctor. So Darth and Joe ran into her many times. Okay, this is another story of Darth and Joe. This is a little later.
What's Sally?
Yeah, actually she is in this story. This is a little later, and it happened.
And the jelly monster.
Well, actually, there's no jelly monster in this story. But let me explain. This is another story that happened with Doctor Who paying Darth and Joe a visit. See, Darth and Joe often called on the Doctor for help, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the Doctor called on Darth and Joe for help, because he knew that they were great with lightsabers and they were going to be Jedi warriors someday. And they were about to start training to be Jedi warriors. So he stopped and he said that there's an emergency and that Sally's planet was in trouble, and could they come with him? And so, of course, they got right into the TARDIS with him, and they flew off.
They didn't even say yes.
They didn't even need to say yes, because, you know, they were his friends. You know, Sally and Doctor Who are their friends, right? So they wanted to help. So they flew, and on the way to Sally's planet, Doctor Who explained that Sally's planet was under attack by some creatures called Gorkons, which are giant ants, but they're intelligent and they fight. And
how big are they?
They're about as big as 3 people. So they're very kind of scary, okay? And
are they real kinds of ants?
no, they're just in the story, but they have weapons too. They don't just try to bite you with their mandibles. They hold on to swords and they try to hit you. And so, and the Doctor said there's a couple things disturbing about this. One, why are these creatures are attacking Sally's planet? That's bad enough. But 2, these creatures haven't been alive for thousands of years. They lived thousands of years ago, and that's why the doctor was involved. There's something strange about time. Where did these creatures come from? Because they're not supposed to be around anymore. They stopped existing years ago. So they got to Sally's planet, and they landed, and sure enough, they saw there was a big battle going on between the Gorlots. Is that what I just said? Okay. So no, they were Gorkons. All right. So it was the Gorkons versus the Gorlots, which were the guards who lived on that planet with the big heads. They were pretty good fighters, and Sally's people who fought with knives and spears, but the Gorkons were winning, the giant ant creatures. And so they landed on a planet, and this battle was taking place already on the planet. And they decided, we've got to find Sally. So Darth and Joe went ahead of Doctor Who, and they used their lightsabers, and they fought off the ants, the Gorkons, because they were actually much better than their lightsabers. They were faster, and they could run faster, and they would hit the spears out of the ants, and they would knock over the ants, and they would get by them, and they managed to make it all the way to Sally's village. And they saw her, and she was battling, and they said, "Sally, we're here to help." And she ran to this other building, and they ran inside too, and they shut the door, and they said, "What? Can you tell us what's going on?" How, and the doctor said, and she said, "Oh, it's good to see you, Doctor," and Joe and Darth, and he said, how long has this been taking place?" And she said, "Well, it's been almost a month now. These Gorkons have we don't know where they came from, but they've been attacking our planet, and I'm afraid that we're losing. Pretty soon they're going to take over the whole planet." And the doctor said, "I'm picking something strange up on my instruments, my time instruments. There is some sort of time anomaly. And once again, it comes from that mountain where..."
Don't make it too scary.
No, that mountain where Gorb the Har...
They were.
Right, remember where that guy came from before? The Har guy? His name was something like Gorb the Har?
Goodalak.
Gudalak?
Yeah.
Well, he could be Gudalak. If that could be his nickname. Anyway, Gudalak. So they decided to go up that mountain. They had to fight their way up there and hide in the woods, and they managed to make it. Sally showed them the secret entrance again to the mountain, and they got inside. And because they knew that Gudalak, or Gorb the Har, had been released from prison because his time of being in prison was over for the crime he committed before, but they didn't think that he would go back to the same planet and try to do another bit of crime. But sure enough, well, that mountain had been destroyed, and yet there it was. And you know what he had done?
What?
The doctor said, there's only two possibilities. One, this is a completely artificially created mountain that he made out of synthetic material to look like the old mountain, or he went back in time and brought the mountain back to the future. And that's what I think happened to the doctor, because there's some residual energy left from that transportation. So they got inside, and this time there were no Gorlots working for him. There were no guards, and they went out to the control room, and they broke in, and he said, "Doctor Who, and you, that Sally person, and Darth and Joe, what are you doing here?" And the doctor said, "Well, more to the point, just what are you doing here?" And he said, "It's none of your business. You destroyed my operation last time, but you're not going to destroy it this time." And suddenly a giant Gorgon came out from around the corner, and he started attacking them. But Doctor Who transported them into the future by a few seconds, so the Gorgon, the ant, was on the other side of them by the time they reappeared. And then Darth and Joe attacked it with their lightsabers and managed to get its weapons out of its hands and kicked it out of the room. And then all of a sudden, Gudala, or Gorb the Har, was alone with Doctor Who, with the Doctor, Sally, Joe, and Darth. And the doctor said, "Why don't you explain exactly what's been going on here?" And so he said, "Well, if you must know, I've opened up a porthole to the past from 12,000 years ago. And okay, these creatures are getting through, but that's all right, because some of them are working for me. They're so thankful to have a new world to conquer. And this porthole is necessary because don't you realize there are there are important minerals we can get from the past that we've run out of here on this planet now, and I can sell them for lots of money. I can become rich." And the doctor said, "Don't you understand? That's not how things work. If you take away the minerals from the past, then there won't be any minerals in the present. You'll mess up the entire history of this planet." And he said, "I don't care. It's working, and I'm getting the minerals, and
My seatbelt.
he'll be okay."
Saba, your seatbelt.
What's that?
Saba, your seatbelt.
Did you say Zaba?
Saba.
Saba. What does that mean?
Don't.
Okay, so anyway, so Doctor Who told Darth and Joe to grab Gorblahar, the good of luck, and they grabbed him away from the control.
And put all the minerals back in the future or history.
Yes, they fixed the mineral problem, but they also decided they had to get rid of the Gorgons, the giant ants. So they found there was a big container of a chemical which attracts giant ants. It's called a pheromone, okay? And they made a trail of it leading down the mountain from the porthole of time, and all of the ants started coming up and following this trail, and they all went into the portal, every single one of them, and then they destroyed the time machine so that it closed the door, so they were stuck, so they were back in the past. And once again they arrested Gorblahar, also known as Good Luck, because he had committed yet another crime against time, and the doctor took him back to the Time Lord planet, and he had to go to jail again for that.
For a long time.
Yeah, for a long time, depending on what you mean by time, because he could always... But yes, they have a special jail to help to hold people who are good at traveling in time, and so that's what happened. Okay?
Turn it off.
All right, this is a Darth and Joe story. This is another story when Darth was 5 and Joe was 3, but they already were friends with the Time Lord, Doctor Who. Doctor? They called him. And so, one day, when Joe was over at Darth's house...
Does it have the girl person in it?
Actually, it does. One day, Darth and Joe came downstairs for breakfast in the morning, and guess what was sitting in the middle of their living room?
Who?
The TARDIS, Doctor Who's ship. Because it's about the size of a telephone booth and it can fit right in their living room. And they said, "Hey, our mom's not going to like you parking your spaceship in our living room." And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, boys, but there's been quite a bit of a mess on a planet, and I was wondering if you could come and help me out." And they said, "Sure, we haven't had breakfast yet." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll get breakfast on the way." And so they got in, and so they left a note for their mom saying, "We've gone out on an adventure, we'll be right back," because they knew that Doctor Who could always bring them back just minutes after they left, right? Because he can take them back in time. And so they got into the TARDIS and they blasted off. And it's okay to blast off from inside a house with a TARDIS because you can go backwards and forwards in time and you can avoid hitting objects. And so they were flying toward this planet and they stopped and they picked up Sally because she's a very good fighter and they might need her help.
Because she reads minds.
And because she reads minds, which actually is very, very important on this adventure. And so they stopped at a cafe on Neptune, which had a really nice meal for them. And while they were eating, Doctor Who told them that there's a planet. It's the third planet around the star Sipop, S-I-P-O-P, Sipop. And this planet is in a lot of trouble. There's some sort. It's ruled by some kind of evil scientist who has been messing with time, and the people of the planet are rebelling, and they're trying to overthrow this guy who's the emperor of the planet, and they have to get there to help the people because the reason that the Time Lord is involved is that this guy is
messing up with time.
He is messing with time. In fact, you know what he's planning to do?
What?
he's planning to go backwards in time and to kill all of his enemies before they were even born. He was going to kill their parents so they can't even have them. And that will mess up all of history, right? So we have to stop him. So, he's a kind of an evil guy.
For that planet, that Sally had, and that other, those ants.
Yes.
Does it have those big ants?
No, not in
I
this
like
one.
them.
Well, he might go back in time and get those big ants, the Gorgons.
Yeah.
And so Doctor Who and Sally and Darth and Joe got into the TARDIS, and Joe said, "Aren't we in a big hurry?" Because Doctor Who was taking his time. He said, "Oh, we're never in a hurry when we're in the TARDIS, because, you know, even if we have to be there in 5 minutes, we can just be there in 4 minutes if we want. Even if it takes half an hour to drive there, we can just go backwards in time a little bit when we get there, right?"
Yeah.
So they got into the TARDIS and they went to the ship and they landed on the planet, and they got out because the atmosphere was breathable on that planet, so it was okay for them to get out. And there were these huge boulders, bigger than, see how big that house is? Twice as big as that. And they were all around. That's what the landscape looked like, just dirt and those boulders. And when Sally said, "Which way do we go, Doctor Who?" suddenly one of the boulders started moving, and it started moving toward them, and they could see it had a huge mouth, and it was coming at them, and it was attacking them, and it started bumping into the TARDIS. And Darth and Joe took out their lightsabers, but they started to defend everybody with their lightsabers. But then Doctor Who said, "No, I don't think that it's evil. I think that it's that we have a communication problem. Quick, Sally, communicate with it." And so she reached out her hands and she just said, "Thirsty, thirsty." And then she said, "It wants water." And the doctor said, "Exactly what I thought. These are Roconians, and they need to drink. Water is very precious on this planet because there's not very much water. See, it's all sand and rocks. And these creatures, when we came out, the air from our breaths has moisture in it, and they smelled it, and they thought that we were food, and they started trying to attack us to get the water. But tell it, Sally, tell it that we have some water inside for it to stop attacking." And so she did. She went, "Ooh," and with her mind. She told the Roconian, and so it stopped attacking, and they got some water out from the ship because he can make instant water out of hydrogen and oxygen, which he does on the ship. And he fed it to the Roconians, and they were very happy. And then he said, "Sally, could you ask the Roconians which way to the underground chambers?" And so she asked him, and they told them that it was straight down the path and to the left there by some of the only trees on the entire planet. And they walked down that way, and they said, "Okay, now listen, this man who's in charge of this planet, his name is Gregor. And he has been messing with time, and I've got to stop him because he could destroy all of history if he succeeds. And my instruments show us that we're very close to his time machine. Plus, if we're successful, then the people of this planet will be free." But right when he was saying that, a guard, which was a Gorgant, started attacking them, came from around this corner. A Gorgant is a giant ant that's about 3 times as big as a person with a sword, and it started attacking them, and Darth quickly pulled out his lightsaber and knocked the sword out of the Gorgant. And Doctor Who said, "Quick, Sally, communicate with the Gorgant." And Sally did, and she explained that the man, Gregor, that he was working for was actually evil and was planning to kill the Gorgants after he was done using them to suppress the to stop the rebellion on the planet. And so the Gorgant decided to join up with them and be on their side. And then they met some leaders from the rebellion, some of the people who were fighting against Gregor and trying to free the planet from Gregor, who was ruling the planet. And they all wore bandanas on their heads. That's how they knew that they were rebels. And they said, they had a song, "Rebels are free, just like the birds and the bees." And they lived in the underground caves. And they said, "We can show you where his laboratory is, Doctor." And he said, "That's a great idea." And so they showed him the way to the laboratory, and Gregor was not expecting them because the Gorgant was actually on on Doctor Who's side now, and Gregor.
They're gonna get all the Gorgons on
Right.
their
Well, the
side.
Gorgons started communicating with the other Gorgons. You know how they communicate? With their feelers. They send signals, chemical signals, just like ants do on Earth, and they can communicate that way. And so all the Gorgons started joining up with the rebellion against Gregor, and so they broke into the control room. And Doctor Who said, "Gregor, I presume." And Gregor said, "I know you. You're the Doctor, aren't you?" And he said, "That's correct." And Gregor said, "What are you doing here?" But Gregor actually knew what he was doing there, because Gregor knew he was committing a crime against time. And Doctor Who said, "You know you're committing a crime against time, Gregor. You're planning to go back into the past and destroy history." And Gregor said, "Well, who's to stop me? Have the Gorgons on my side. Attack them, Gorgons!" But the Gorgons didn't attack them. Instead, the Gorgons turned toward Gregor and started walking toward him and said, Gorgons, attack, attack! What are you doing? You're turning this way." And but there was nothing he could do, and the Gorgons grabbed him, and they pulled him over, and they handed him to Doctor Who. And Darth and Joe and Sally tied up Gregor, but one of the leaders of the rebellion said, "But listen, it's too late. He's already gone back in time, and he killed the mother of one of the people in the rebellion, and that person stopped existing. And the only way we know that he even existed was that we we were protected in a protected time zone, so we could know what was going on. And we've got to go back in time and fix that." And so Doctor Who said, "Sally, I want you to stay with Gregor and make sure he doesn't get away. And I'm going to I want to send the Gorgons back to their world." And he sent the Gorgons back to their time. And then he said, "Now listen, we're going to have to go through Gregor's time machine, find him, because Gregor is here, right? But he went back in time to kill this person's mother, and we're going to have to go back in time and stop him before he does it, right? So we'll go back in time a little before he gets there, and then we'll arrest him when he gets there, okay?" And so they went back in time right to 5 minutes before Gregor arrived. And Gregor arrived with a big knife, but Doctor Who, Darth and Joe were ready for him, and Joe knocked the knife out of Gregor's hand, and Darth grabbed Gregor, and they brought him back to the present. So now the person's mother was never killed after all, and the person is suddenly there in the rebellion, right? Because he was born. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay, and so the Doctor, but now there are two Gregors, because there was the Gregor that was there that they had captured before, and there was the Gregor that they captured from who had gone back in time. So they had to put that Gregor back to his own time, which was a few minutes before. It's kind of complicated, but they put him back into the time where he belongs, and they went back in time before he had perfected his time machine, and they smashed it and destroyed it, and then they took Gregor from the present, from the last Gregor, and they took him back to the Time Lord's planet and put him in jail with Gorkha, the good luck, the guy that was in prison before. So now there are two time criminals in the prison. But while they were in prison, you know what the Time Lords do? They teach them all about time and why it's important not to destroy history. Because if you go back in time and you mess something up, it could have very bad ramifications. Like, say you go back in time and you step on a butterfly and gets killed. Maybe that was a butterfly that a dog was going to eat. And maybe that was a dog that a bear was going to eat. And maybe that was a bear that was going to become friends with a farmer and save him from a wolf who was going to attack him. And maybe that farmer was going to start a new country, and maybe that country was going to invent some kind of amazing cleaning fluid, and without that cleaning fluid, your kitchen would have been very dirty. So because you stepped on the butterfly, your kitchen will end up dirty. Because everything has a cause and effect, right?
Yes.
Throughout history. And if you go back in time and change something, it'll change things all through history. It'll have a ripple effect, is what it's called, because one thing leads to another. And so it's the Time Lord's job to make sure that nobody messes with time and with history. Okay, because you love Gorgons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you love the giant swords that Gorgons have, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in this story, this is when Doctor Who actually
Found
took.
Benjamin asleep.
Well, he did. And while Benjamin was sleeping, Doctor Who took Darth and Joe back to the past, to the Gorgant's planet, 2,000 years ago. Actually, a little less than 2,000 years ago. And they took Sally to communicate with the Gorgants, okay? And the reason that they went...
And they came with thousands of presents because they wanted to give something
Right.
to them.
They gave them molecular honey. They gave them some Gorgant food, which the Gorgants like sugar and honey and raisins, and so Doctor Who, but special ones from their own planet. So Doctor Who brought back lots of presents for them because they needed the Gorgants' help because there was a woman on one of the moons around Jupiter who had created some mechanical Gorgant, some Gorgant robots that looked just like Gorgants, almost like them, except they were made out of metal, and she was using them to attack a city. Oh, what is it? She was using them to attack a city on Jupiter, and so Doctor Who needed the real Gorgants to come and help fight the mechanical Gorgants who were programmed to attack this city, because he thought that the real Gorgants could sneak in and she wouldn't know they were real. She would think they were her robots, right? And they all had giant swords that they could fight with. And so he brought back some volunteer Gorgants to this moon around Jupiter, where this woman, her name...
They even had the giant ants.
That's right, and this woman, her name was Plasma, and she was the reason she was attacking the city on Jupiter was she was trying to get a precious mineral from the city, which she could sell for a lot of money. So she was trying to steal it, and she thought the only way she could steal it was to use her mechanical Gorgants. And so Doctor Who, Joe, and Darth went with Sally.
And the giant ants.
Right, and they got the giant ants called the Gorgants with their swords and...
Which are my favorite.
Yes, and they brought them back. They brought them back one at a time in the TARDIS. The TARDIS is pretty big, but they decided that they better just bring them back one at a time until they had a whole army of them, 15 of them, and these were all volunteer Gorgants who volunteered to fight the mechanical Gorgants, and so they snuck onto the moon around Jupiter, and they saw the robot ants, and they told the Gorgants, just pretend that you're robot ants for right now, don't attack. And so they took their robot ants right by the other ants, and nobody knew that they were real Gorgants, because she didn't even know that there were any real Gorgants there. Plasma didn't know that. And
Because they were all dead, they thought.
yeah, and so so then they went into the control room, and there she was, and Doctor Who and Joe and Darth and Sally said, Plasma, your time is up. You can't go around attacking other worlds, stealing their precious minerals. And she said, oh yes? What are you going to do? I've got Gorgants on my side. And she said, attack the mechanical Gorgants. But guess what? The two mechanical Gorgants in the room were actually the real Gorgants. And Doctor said, sorry, Sally, sorry, Plasma, these Gorgants work for us. And the Gorgants started to attack Plasma. And she ran to the other room and called in two other mechanical Gorgants, and soon the Gorgants were fighting each other. The real Gorgants were fighting the mechanical Gorgants with their swords. Psh, 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 psh. And Darth and Joe were helping. Psh, psh, psh. And Sally was grabbing onto the legs of the mechanical Gorgants and knocking them down. But there were lots of them, and they were chopping up the mechanical Gorgants and putting them into a pile because they were just made out of metal. And Darth and Joe ran after Plasma, who was getting into an escape pod, and they said, quick, she's getting to an escape pod. And Doctor Who said, oh, don't worry, just let her go, I've got a way of catching her. And so soon they were able to defeat all of the mechanical Gorgants, and then Doctor Who said, it's time to go find Plasma. And Darth said, well, by now she must be millions of light years away, she left 45 minutes ago. And Doctor Who said, well, we can fix that, can't we? And Sally said, yes, we can go backwards in time. And so they got into the TARDIS, and they went backwards in time 45 minutes to actually they went backward 46 minutes to 1 minute before Plasma was about to get into her spaceship. And they waited for her until she was on the other side of the room. She was coming through the door because she was running away from them on that side of the room, right? But did she know that they were always also waiting for her on the other side of the door, and they grabbed her right before she had a chance to get into her ship, and they arrested her, and they took her to the police, the Jupiterian police of Jupiter, and they put her in jail because it's illegal to attack cities with giant mechanical gorgons and steal their minerals.
But you could kill robots.
Yes, because robots aren't really alive. So they chopped up the robots, but guess what? Darth and Joe said, you know something? It'd be nice to have mechanical gorgons of our own as long as they were programmed to do good and not evil. And Doctor said, that's an excellent idea. And so they rebuilt the robots so that they could work for Darth and Joe. And they decided to keep them on Jupiter. And if they ever needed them, the robots would be on Jupiter. And so they kept them with the police on Jupiter as they worked for the police, but they also would work for Darth and Joe whenever Darth and Joe wanted, you know, whenever they needed gorgons, well, mechanical ones anyway. And they thanked the gorgons who helped them out, and they gave them lots of food, and they sent them back to their planet. And then Darth and Joe.
And they're gonna soon adapt to coming to this universe, because they can come through that door of time.